Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another of my takes on China. This time I want to talk about why the USA misunderstands their relationships so much. In my opinion, the US government rushed out of Afghanistan faster than anyone could have thought possible. They were stupid. They knew they'd failed, they had a poor schedule, and what should have happened was a phased departure, and then billions of dollars of equipment that was left there would not have been left there. I've seen people defending this and saying that they left it there for the Afghan army. But then we've all seen videos and articles of soldiers destroying trucks, armored personnel carriers, even planes, ripping out GPSs and radios so that they couldn't be used. It's simply not true that they left them there for the army to use. They destroyed critical components, they cannibalized parts from them, and they rendered them unusable. It was clear they were not being left for the use of the local army. They were being disabled because it was too time-consuming or too costly to repatriate them back home. But I don't think even their smartest analyst would have realized that the Taliban would take over the entire country in less than a month. Not after the $2 trillion that they put into training and equipping the local army. That was a complete strategy failure, and there's really only one explanation. What must have happened is that the entire army, or at least the vast majority of them, must have thrown off their uniforms, donned their Taliban clothes, started to regrow their beards, and opened the doors of their barracks and compounds to welcome their brothers. They didn't change sides so much as change uniforms, since they were already on the same side. That much is obvious. And what this means is that the USA was using the Taliban to fight the Taliban. They were funding the Taliban to equip themselves, and there's no other explanation for it. The US, or at least the vast majority of them, believe they are fighting for freedom. Their minds have been so conditioned to believe that they are in the right and everybody else is in the wrong, that they, or at least many of them, think everyone wants to be like them. I think the Taliban knew this. They've proven to be much better at understanding US psychology and behavior than the US are at understanding theirs. There's still a lot of criticism that women's rights are being abused in Afghanistan, but some perspective needs to be understood here. Afghanistan is, as it has been for centuries, an impoverished country with traditional Islamic values, and in order to rebuild countries such as this, they'll go back to those values. According to the BBC, there are no Western media outlets operating in Afghanistan now. Yet we're being told by Western media of how freedoms are being eroded and censorship is rife. In the same article, where the BBC tells us that women rarely appear in media, they go on to tell us that female announcers must wear face covering. We're being told that the country is impoverished, but we're also told that only 22% of the people there use the internet. Does the BBC not realize that impoverished people don't have access to laptops, smartphones, or Wi-Fi? Maybe they don't. The same media, who are no longer in Afghanistan, want us to believe that girls are banned from school. And for most things in Western media, this has proven to be untrue. Schools did close for 5 months as the country re-established itself for boys and girls. But as China's Global Times saw and republished from an AFP report, when they opened, they included females. As Afghanistan is an impoverished and traditional region, what's probably happened there is that the local authorities have decided they need to prioritize education. And traditionally, in that kind of community, it means educating men. They haven't got the schools, the teachers, the materials and resources to educate everyone yet. So they revert to traditional methods and educate those that they can afford to, in the hope that they will, in the future, work towards education for all. AP reports that more than 1 million people have been affected by this decision. But then it goes on to say that prior to the Taliban takeover, more than 5 million girls were affected and uneducated. And this is when the USA were in charge. So since the Taliban have taken over, girls are better placed, but still not as well placed as we in the West would like them to be. That's a problem, yes. My bet is that once the country has settled down, once the dust settles and the income starts to come back in, then girls will be allowed to be educated. Their lack of education is not a lack of desire or an unwillingness. It's a realistic look at the situation today and a solution that affects people our media would like to describe as vulnerable, marginalized, or oppressed. It's just tradition. Who is it who tells us that the Taliban are bad? The answer is the same people who are telling us that Venezuela, Iran, the DPRK, Cuba, and Russia are bad. The same people telling us China is bad. It's the US government and their media. Now, if we're honest here, there's no way the Taliban could have retaken power in their own country if the people of the country didn't want them there. And there's no way that queues of refugees who had left Afghanistan during the US invasion and occupation would have poured back across the border from Pakistan if they weren't happy that the Taliban had returned to power. The photo came from Xinhua. Likewise, in Vietnam, there is no way Ho Chi Minh could have overcome the might of the US military if the people of Vietnam didn't want him to. There's no way Castro would have lived as long as he did and died a natural death if the people of Cuba didn't want him there. Kim Jong-un wouldn't have been able to take over as the third leader of a dynasty in a country that the West vilifies as the worst place in the world to live if the people there weren't happy to go along with it. Why do I say this? Could it be that media is not being truthful about North Korea? The only way to find out is to go to North Korea and ask them. And surprisingly, the LA Times did that in 2017. And the result appears that the rest of the media has been lying to us. As the Taliban are aware, but the US have yet to learn, no military is powerful enough to resist a revolutionary force lifting itself from oppression. While we're thinking about that, about how Western media misinforms us of these facts, let's consider this. Communist China is proven by Ipsos to be the happiest country on their global happiness scale. Latin America, which is experiencing a surge of leftist socialism, has also surged in happiness, while Western democracies are dropping, according to Ipsos. And yet our media keeps telling us we're better off under capitalism. Could it be that the information we know that is wrong about China, Cuba, Vietnam, and North Korea is equally as wrong about Afghanistan? Well, the only way to find out is not by reading what Western media tells us, but by going there and seeing for ourselves. That's exactly what I did when I arrived in China, and I found I'd been so very badly misinformed. I wonder if the rest of those places are equally as erroneous. Thanks once again for watching My Take on China, and I'll see you next time.